Most men believe that seduction is a sequence of correct actions done at the right moment, a better line, a bolder attitude, extra effort. And the more they try to adjust these external pieces, the more they realize something doesn't fit. Interest doesn't sustain itself. Attraction doesn't deepen. Desire doesn't arise. This happens because female desire does not respond to isolated actions. It responds to the mental state a man sustains while acting. David Buss makes this clear when studying desire through evolutionary psychology. Women were not biologically shaped to react to explicit attempts at seduction, but to consistent signals of value, direction, and situational dominance. The female body evaluates who governs his internal state, who occupies space naturally, and who reacts to the environment instead of being governed by it. What matters is not what you do once, but what you consistently represent. That is why canned lines fail. That is why appearance alone does not sustain desire. That is why direct effort often produces the opposite effect. The female brain is not aroused by trying. It is aroused by reading. Reading posture, reading rhythm, reading emotional stability. When a man tries to seduce, he places himself in a position of pursuit. When he sustains the right state, he is interpreted as a choice. The so-called hidden trick was never a specific move or a single technique. It is a continuous behavioral state, an alignment between mind, body, and attitude that remains even when nothing is happening. Few men activate this because it requires self-mastery, social awareness, and emotional control. It does not require momentary courage. It requires internal consistency, and internal consistency is rare. Throughout this video, you will understand the exact mechanism that makes the female brain reinterpret you, not as someone pleasant or socially acceptable, but as a sexual man. This mechanism does not depend on impressing or convincing. It depends on sustaining the right state long enough for instinct to do the rest. When that happens, desire does not need to be provoked. It emerges as a natural response to what you have come to represent. Technique 1. Psychological positioning of choice, not pursuit. There's a brutal difference between the man who enters an environment wanting to be accepted and the man who enters observing whether it is worth staying. This difference is not spoken, it is felt. Robert Greene explains that whoever appears to choose activates automatic attraction because he occupies a higher position in the psychological hierarchy. This is not arrogance, it is absence of need. And the female brain recognizes this in less than a second. When you position yourself as a candidate, everything about you communicates pursuit. The body leans in, the rhythm accelerates. Words try to convince. The man who positions himself as a filter maintains his axis. He does not change his energy when entering. He does not adapt to fit. He observes, measures, decides. This silent posture immediately changes instinctive perception. Studies from Princeton show that judgments of value and dominance happen in fractions of a second before any verbal content. That means the decision begins before the conversation exists. This technique does not depend on speech because speech comes after positioning. It depends on how you occupy social space, entering without haste, maintaining open and stable posture, looking without asking permission. When you ask selective questions instead of presenting yourself, you communicate discernment. Discernment communicates value. Value awakens curiosity. And curiosity is the first step of desire. Notice the detail almost no one applies. Ending interactions when you decide, not when the topic runs out. This breaks the pattern of neediness. The female brain reads this movement as control of rhythm. Control of rhythm is read as leadership. Leadership is associated with protection and direction. Protection and direction are ancient biological triggers, deep and difficult to ignore. The result of this technique is silent but powerful. You stop being interpreted as someone seeking acceptance and start being read as a source of value. Not because you said something impressive, but because you didn't need to. When a man occupies the position of choice, the environment reorganizes around him. And when the environment reorganizes, desire finds space to emerge without being called. Technique 2. cognitive sexual tension, curiosity, and ambiguity. Few men understand that desire does not grow when everything is clear, but when something remains open. Carl Jung explained that psychic energy moves toward what is unresolved, toward what provokes interpretation, toward what demands reading. The female brain is not aroused when it receives everything ready-made. It is aroused when it needs to decipher, when it needs to imagine. Something is left suspended in the air. The common mistake is confusing clarity with attraction. The man thinks that by showing interest early and making everything explicit, he creates security. What he actually creates is closure. When everything is explained, the nervous system relaxes, and excessive relaxation does not generate desire. Desire needs cognitive tension, that subtle feeling of curiosity that keeps the mind active even after the interaction ends. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology shows that controlled ambiguity increases dopaminergic activation. Dopamine does not respond to the predictable. It responds to contrast, expectation, and what is not fully resolved. When you give answers that are too complete or confirm interest too early, you close the circuit before it has time to strengthen. Desire does not have time to grow. This technique has nothing to do with games or emotional confusion. It requires precision, incomplete but confident answers, firm presence without invasion. You do not hide. You do not run away. You simply do not give everything at once. You alternate moments of full attention with brief withdrawals of focus, not to punish but to keep the field alive. Notice how this changes the dynamic. The woman starts thinking after the interaction. She replays phrases, interprets silences, fills in gaps. And the more the mind works, the more the body follows. Desire is built in this internal space you left open. It is not about saying less. It is about saying enough to awaken, not to satisfy. The practical application requires calm, not confirming interest early, not verbalizing intentions before the right time, sustaining presence without the need for immediate closure. When you master this cognitive tension, flirting becomes psychological. And the psychological is always deeper than the obvious. This is where most fail because they do not understand the mechanism. And this is why the code of seduction exists, not as mysterious phrases, but as a system that teaches how to create real psychological tension. A method based on evolutionary psychology, behavioral reading, and social dynamics, showing how desire truly activates. This knowledge is not taught publicly because it requires emotional responsibility and internal control. Technique 3. Visible emotional mastery. The most sexual trigger of all, there is a moment in every interaction when the environment tries to pull you off center. A comment, a provocation, an unexpected silence. Everything is decided here. Not by what is said, but by who maintains control of their internal state. Nietzsche described the magnetic man as the one who governs himself before attempting to govern anything around him. Desire is born from this internal sovereignty that does not need to be announced. The female body interprets emotional control as capacity for leadership and protection. This is not moral, it is biological. Studies from the University of California show that self-control is associated with the perception of high status. When emotions do not hijack your decisions, you communicate that stimuli do not disorganize you. You choose how to respond. The common mistake is trying to fix the mood, explaining too much, laughing at the wrong time, changing tone to please. All of this communicates anxiety. Anxiety communicates loss of control, and loss of control kills desire. Visible emotional mastery is not coldness. It is stability under pressure. Feeling tension while sustaining your rhythm, not reacting immediately, not resolving everything at once, sustaining the atmosphere instead of escaping it. When you do this, the expectation of reaction is not confirmed. The test loses strength. The reading adjusts. This signals deep maturity, not performative confidence, but confidence built from self-observation in difficult moments. The man who sustains emotional mastery creates instinctive safety, and where there is safety, desire finds permission to exist. Few men master this because it requires internal training, not momentary courage, inner silence, not fast responses. When this mastery appears naturally, the effect is immediate. You stop being interesting, you become solid, and solidity at the instinctive level is one of the deepest foundations of attraction. Conclusion: the hidden trick is not seducing, it is sustaining the right state. Female desire is not born from attempts. It is born from interpretation, not isolated moves but continuous coherence. Psychological positioning, sustained tension, and emotional mastery form the complete signal. When these align, desire appears without being summoned. Techniques only work when they stop looking like techniques. Positioning as the chooser is identity in action. Cognitive tension is the absence of anxiety-driven disclosure. Emotional mastery is maturity under pressure. When these layers become natural, a man stops trying to seduce. He starts being read as seductive. The chooser sets rhythm. The unresolved sustains curiosity. Emotional control creates safety. Together, these forces redefine how you are perceived. Not as socially pleasant, but as sexually relevant. Not by effort, but by state. Some will continue forcing interest. Others will sustain the right state and let instinct do the rest. The difference between these paths defines who is chosen without asking.